On January 29th, 2026, the United States didn't just sign another executive order. It effectively declared a whole new kind of war. What we're about to break down here is the anatomy of that crisis, a new type of conflict unfolding just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The official name is Project Cuba, but don't let that fool you. This isn't some relic from the Cold War. No, this is 21st century economic warfare, a maximum pressure campaign designed with one chillingly simple goal in mind: total energy asphyxiation. And the weapon here? It's not what you think. It's not a naval blockade. It's something entirely new, something called the tariff tracker. And it's a system designed to paint a giant target on the back of any nation that even thinks about helping Cuba. The effect has been devastating, and it's been immediate. As we speak, lights across Havana are flickering out. We're hearing that hospitals are running on backup generators, measuring their fuel in hours, not days. This is an island being systematically pushed into darkness. And back in Washington, they're not even hiding it anymore. The quiet part is being said right out loud. The goal, stated plainly by the Secretary of State, is regime change. Make no mistake, the stakes here could not be higher. So the big question is, how on earth did we get here? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll look at the economic war on Cuba, unpack its secret weapon, the tariff tracker, see how it led to a standoff with Mexico, examine the devastating human cost, understand the political endgame, and finally, ask what this all means for a new global battlefield. Okay, so let's start at the beginning with the official declaration itself. On January 29th, the White House announced that Cuba is no longer just a difficult neighbor. It is now officially an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. So you have to ask, why now? I mean, after 6 decades of this tense relationship, why this move right now? Well, the administration gave 3 core reasons. First, the presence of Russian and Chinese spy outposts on the island. Second, alleged Cuban support for groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. But the third reason, that's the real catalyst. That's the one that changes everything: the sudden collapse of Venezuela. You have to understand, for the last 20 years, Venezuela has been Cuba's lifeline, its economic life support system, trading oil for doctors. But just weeks ago, on January 3rd, a U.S. operation resulted in the capture of Nicolás Maduro, and in one fell swoop, Cuba lost 80% of its fuel supply. The administration saw blood in the water. They saw a window of opportunity to squeeze off the remaining 20% and force the island to its breaking point. So this brings us to the really clever part, the secret weapon. Because you can't just send the Navy to stop oil tankers from reaching Cuba. I mean, that's a straight-up act of war. So instead, the administration dug into obscure economic law to create a new and brutally effective tool of statecraft. I mean, really think about that for a second. How do you pull that off? How do you financially choke a country from thousands of miles away without firing a single shot and somehow convince every other nation on Earth to help you do it? Well, the answer is buried in this thing called an ad valorem tariff. Now, it sounds complicated, but it's just a tax based on the value of goods. But here's the absolutely brilliant and, let's be honest, devastating twist in this new policy. The tariff isn't on the oil being sent to Cuba. It's on everything else. This slide lays out the 4-step trap perfectly. First, the U.S. government monitors global shipping. Second, they spot a tanker from, let's say, Mexico, heading for a Cuban port. Third, the Secretary of State recommends a tariff. And then, bam, step 4, the president imposes that tariff. Not on Mexican oil, but on every single car, avocado, and television Mexico sells to the United States. And we are not talking about a small tax here. We're talking about a potential tariff as high as 50%. Just let that sink in for a moment. A 50% tax on a country's entire export economy to its biggest trading partner. It basically turns the American consumer market into a weapon of mass economic destruction. And that brings us to the first real-world test of this powerful new weapon. Because, you see, the primary target of Project Cuba, well, it isn't really Havana at all. It's Mexico City. Just imagine you're Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum. You are facing a truly impossible choice. On the one hand, do you send desperately needed humanitarian aid to a historic ally and risk a trade war that could completely decimate your country's middle class? Or do you cave to U.S. pressure and just stand by and watch a humanitarian catastrophe unfold right on your doorstep? When President Trump was asked about this very dilemma, his response was, well, it was simple, and it was chillingly confident. They'll stop, he said. Believe me, they'll stop. The pressure is absolutely immense, and it is designed to be inescapable. So while the politicians and diplomats are playing this high-stakes game of chicken, the reality on the ground in Cuba has descended into a complete nightmare. This is the human cost of turning off a country's lights. The national power grid is failing several times a week now. Hospitals are literally canceling surgeries because they don't have enough fuel for the generators. Without electricity, water pumps fail, leaving whole cities dry. Food is rotting in useless refrigerators. And here's the thing you have to watch. This level of desperation is the exact kind of thing that could trigger a massive migration crisis, potentially sending hundreds of thousands of people towards Florida. One publication summed it up in a way that it really sticks with you. They wrote, "This is not a blockade to prevent weapons. It is an asphyxiation designed to starve the population into an uprising. It is collective punishment on a scale we haven't seen in this century." So what is the end game here? What's the master plan? Well, if President Trump is the hammer of Project Cuba, you could say Secretary of State Marco Rubio is its architect, and he has a very clear, very cold vision for what happens next. Cuba's government is basically being given two options, and only two. Path number one is the deal. Kick out Russia and China, cut all ties with Iran and its proxies, open the doors to American investment, and in exchange, the oil starts flowing again. The alternative? It's simple. Refuse the deal and face a total, complete collapse of the state. All right, let's pull back the lens for a second, because the shockwaves from Project Cuba are being felt far beyond the Caribbean. This is being seen around the world as the first major test of a new, much more aggressive American foreign policy. What we're witnessing here is a fundamental shift. The United States is basically signaling that it might not play by the rules of the World Trade Organization anymore. And that creates an incredibly dangerous precedent. I mean, if Washington can use this weapon against Mexico over Cuba, why not use it against Germany over Russian gas, or against South Korea over trade with China? This is the birth of raw economic sphere of influence politics, where trade is no longer about commerce, it's about coercion. And this is what it all boils down to. This is the critical question we're all left with. Is this tariff tracker a brilliant new tool for a great power to enforce its will without going to war? Or have we just witnessed the beginning of the end for the global free trade system that we've known for the last half-century? The answer to that question is going to shape the next decade of global politics.